Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board of the Metropolitan Council. It is December 15th, 2021, and it is 12:33 on my computer. We will do what we've been doing in this virtual world, and we will approve the agenda and answer the roll simultaneously. So, Ms. Ernst, will you call the roll and seek approval of the agenda as published in the same roll call?
Anderson.
Present and I.
Bailey.
Present and I.
Arbor.
Present and I.
Burns.
Present and I.
Morast and for Boyles.
Present and I.
Crimmins.
Present and I.
Dugan.
Present and I already concede the Christmas tie award to my good friend from the commissioner from Washington County, Mr. Kowalski.
Thanks, Peter. Foster.
Present I.
Fox.
Present and I.
Geisler.
Present and I.
Giuliani Stevens.
Present and I.
Gotel.
Yeah.
Or Anderson and for Gotel. Okay, Hanson.
Present I.
Holberg.
Here, yes.
Hollinshead.
Present I.
Delali. Jepson. Karwoski.
Present and I.
Keeley. Lindicky. Or did I see Shannon Watson on? Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, I did. Okay. Thanks, Shannon. Look.
Present and I.
Bewan.
Present and I.
Metis Castile.
Present and I.
Narayanan. Or I thought I saw Glenn Johnson. Are you in for Ash?
I can be present and I.
Hedrick.
Present and I.
Drake.
Present I.
Lewis.
Present and I.
Schember.
Present and I.
Stephenson.
Present and I.
Williams.
Present and I.
Beard and for Ulrich.
Present and I.
Windshuttle.
Here. Aye.
And it looks like Uderman and for Workman.
Present and I.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Ernst. And again, greetings, everybody. We have a... Say again. Somebody come in late?
Yes, Gotel coming in via
Yes,
phone.
and it looks like member Narayanan is in as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Member Narayanan, for letting us know you were here. We've got an approved form of agenda. And though this is the virtual world, we've got time for any public comment. The meetings are posted up in advance. Is there anyone that's joined the meeting that's not a TAB member that wishes to address the TAB on a matter of concern to them? All right, hearing nothing, let's move on to the reports portion of the agenda. The first report is from your chair, and I've got a few things to cover with everybody today. And we covered some of these things in the exec committee as well. We've got some outgoing TAB members, and Frank Boyles, are you with us? I thought I heard him, his name called, and that he answered.
Chair, John Morast is in for Frank. He's out today.
All right, okay. Well, here, folks, we got some outgoing TAB members. Sue Sanger and Frank Boyles did not reapply. And Kevin Reich, of course, ends his term of service to the city of Minneapolis at the end of December. So I just want to give those, if you want to give them a virtual clap, thank them for their service to the TAB. We'll get them some appropriate lucite hardware somewhere in the future here so that they can have that on their shelf somewhere or in a box in their closet. Kevin, I'm so pleased that you were able to be with us for the exec committee meeting and the main tab meeting. You've just been a wonderful member and served your city and also the tab and the region so well. We're really going to miss your service, and for Frank and for Sue too. Sue, who was a longtime public servant and also serving on the tab, always so much wisdom to offer. And Frank more recently, but really a contributing member as well after those years of service as city manager in Prior Lake, really brought value to the tab in different ways. But Kevin, to have you with us here it means a lot to me personally, and I want to personally thank you for doing a terrific job just all across the region. And I hope there's some way that the public continues to be served by you, because I know you've got a keen interest in serving others. So thanks for being with us today. And I'm going to turn over to Kevin to see if he has any comments.
Not in particular, but I would say it's been a real honor working with this group. It's one of my most favorite assignments on behalf of the city because the things we do here, it matters, and people see the investment in real, tangible ways. And to be a part of that is very, very gratifying to me. But what's also very gratifying to me and will be a lasting memory is getting all the different insights from you people who represent your different parts of the region. To me, I always found that fascinating how you take on the regional challenge and prioritization challenge that we take on every year, but how it goes through the lens of your people in your communities. I've been really enriched by that. I feel like I've learned more about my state of Minnesota through the lens of your leadership and representation of your communities. That was just a real treat and something I will deeply miss. I'll still be involved in different things in my community, but to hear those stories and your leadership, that was a real joy and a pleasure and an honor. So thank all of you for that.
Well, we've got Kevin with us today. Let's give him one more round of applause. Really fantastic job. Well done. All right. Also, as part of my report, remember that if you're interested in serving on tab exec, we need to know that by the end of the year, and that's not that far away now. We've got, and how it gets populated, just as a reminder, county board members, we've got 2 on there, and we've got 3 county commissioners interested already, so we've got a good population going there. Debbie Gattell, Stan Karwoski, both serving at present. John Ulrich is always interested in serving in some other capacity. So if there are any other commissioners that wish to throw their name in the hat, please feel free to do so. Board members of cities of the first class, where Kevin served so ably, we do not have anybody that's applied yet. And so it's typically those 2 cities, either Minneapolis or St. Paul, that provide that membership on the exec committee representing cities of the first class. So we're going to have to do some recruiting. I don't know, Kevin, if you think there's somebody on the Minneapolis City Council that should be interested. But we would like to, if so, we'd like to know that so we can talk to them.
Yeah, I will definitely try to make that connection expeditiously.
All right, thank you. And then board members from the remaining cities, we've got 2 spots for those folks. Mayor Winschittel's indicated his continuing interest, and I'm not sure about Mayor Stephenson, but we've still got some room there for people to apply. And then members representing the citizen board members, that's a 1 slot position, and members Geisler and Dugan have indicated their interest in continuing to serve in those serving in those capacities. Chris Geisler continuing to serve, and Peter, always one of the world's great volunteers from a regional standpoint. And then we still need, I think Matt Hollins has been representing modal and the broad modal interests, and I think he'll be reapplying, but we need applications for a member representing the modes and the remaining agency board members, which is a 1-person slot. And then the agencies populate themselves with respect to who's involved in the tab by statute. And that's, of course, MnDOT, MPCA, the MAC, and the Met Council. So keep that in mind, folks. So if you're interested, get something to us by the end of the year. Oh, and Deb just put a note in there that John Morast, his service ends the end of the year too. So let's give him a round of applause and thanks. Thanks, John. Elaine, I guess I can report out on this. In that unique projects category, you remember we asked for early application there before we start the regional solicitation work. And we had 10 applicants in that category. And the broad areas that they covered were innovative ways to connect destinations, stormwater resiliency management, electric vehicles and charging, mobility hubs, shared mobility and curb management, and then winter mobility improvements. As is usually the case with transportation funding, the collective requests far exceed the $4 million that we have available. The threshold issue there is to have all those 10 letters of interest reviewed and the ideas they have for funding unique projects reviewed to see if they qualify from a federal standpoint, so that federal eligibility is what Elaine is working on right now, and she'll be back to us to let us know how many of those 10 applicants will meet that requirement on the requirements on federal eligibility. And then this is something that I think we may have time to talk about a little bit at the end of the meeting, because we'll have I believe, a shorter meeting today, but tab topics of interest for next year. And I'm going to have Elaine send you, we got a list of about 20 at the tab exec committee that we look at from time to time. I'm going to have her include those to send to the general membership. But we were going to send out a survey form following the tab meeting that will allow you to indicate topics of interest for next year, and also improvements that we can make sort of structurally in how we run our business of the tab to improve our efficiency and effectiveness too. So those will be the two primary areas covered in the survey. And then I think we're going to go on to the agency reports. I think Deb Barber is going to talk a little bit about Charles Carlson, that we're grateful is now with us from an MPS directorship standpoint. But we'll cover that in the other reports that are yet to come. And so I think that completes it for me for the chair's report. And then I'm going to move on to MnDOT. And I think Member Barnes is with us to give us an update from MnDOT.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple items. First, I know there's been some questions that are starting to even surface more around the recent Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, or otherwise called the bill. Also, I know there's been more emails and questions on that, and again, more work has been done. But if you want to participate and kind of find out even more from it, tomorrow there's the kind of the joint Alliance and MnDOT workshop, Federal Infrastructure Plan workshop. So if you have received that, and there's a in person or even the online, it's 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock tomorrow. And so our commissioner will be kind of leading off, and we'll have some staff go over what kind of the different funding levels and some of the areas of that Jobs Act, and also in the afternoon some small group and Mentimeter exercises to get input on this, and again, been working with the Transportation Alliance. So if you want to find out some more, at least even then, if you're not able to, I think attend tomorrow, it sounds like it will be recorded also, and then there'll be some follow-on things with that. So I think it'll be a good avenue there to learn some more and to be able to get many of the questions answered in a bigger group. And another side of this here, I think we got our taste of getting the snow this last weekend. So our crews were out and ranging from a few inches to the 20 inches. And so folks know we are ready for the opposite end of the spectrum for the rain that's on its way. So it seems to be in a little bit of a reverse order, but we're loaded and ready to go. So nothing like going from the freezing temperatures to the snow to now the heat wave to the rain. But just so you know, we're ready for it. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Member Barnes. I noticed that Tim Sexton from MnDOT, when you were talking about the Transportation Alliance program tomorrow, has put the information about how to participate virtually in the chat. So if
Good.
people want
That's
to
good.
look at that and cut and paste that, I would encourage you to do so. And then Elaine, maybe you could pull it down and then recirculate it after the meeting through tab too as well to all the tab members, so they've got that link in case they want to tune into that particular matter. And I think Mayor Winchell is going to be participating in that as well. Mayor?
Yes, I am.
All right, good. Well, it's just a positive affirmation of his participation, short and sweet. All right, we'll move on to Todd Bewins with us today from MPC8. Member Bewin, anything you wish to report out on?
Mr.
Thank you.
Chair, I have a question about your report, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Or-
sure. Sorry, Member Hollinshead, and I should have asked if anybody had any questions of Member Barnes as well, but let's go back. Member Hollinshead, go ahead.
This is actually for you and for Member Barnes and for the staff who support us so well here at TAB. I first got involved in transportation when ICE-T, some of you may remember that acronym from 1991, created a metropolitan, what was then called a metropolitan guarantee, which is the ancestor or the basis for the solicitation funds that we vote on every cycle here at the TAB. So I have an interest in knowing what the new Federal Infrastructure Act is going to use as formula to send money to the states and to send money to the MPOs. I could probably poke around and Google it and find some things on my own, but I would like to hear from whoever knows the most about this. What percentage of the, what is it, $5.5 billion? And does that include the 600 plus million for transit? I don't know. What percentage of that money from the federal infrastructure bill is going to actually come directly to Minnesota's MPOs, and specifically to this MPO, the Metropolitan Council? And therefore, what percentage of that money would we vote on and handle through our solicitation process, if any? So that's my basic question. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Member Hollinshead. I don't think we'll get that information at hand because I think there's analysis going on right now, but maybe by the time we have our next meeting in January, Elaine, do you think we'd have an opportunity, or John Solberg to, or Member Barnes to have that information available?
We can check. I think right now, finding out what after the session tomorrow, we might get more information there. And then I guess we'll be working with MnDOT to get more information as it comes through.
All right.
Yeah, there's going to be stuff that gets highlighted tomorrow that may answer. I know it seems like a very simple or straightforward question with that, and there's the part that comes in that is like looks or feels like the normal program and those types of things. But then there's some different nuances to some of the programs, and even when we're just talking up front here about some of the special projects, which is interesting because there is some of the programs where some of that money will come in that some of those projects would be eligible. So which way and how that'll get worked out, there's still some more details with it. So I think what you're going to end up finding out is that there's going to be some kind of direct answers of what looks like is right in the pot that says here's the direct funding, but then there's going to be these other opportunities. In fact, even more discussion on what would be potential grant type things and in that process. So it's going to take a little bit. Tomorrow will. That's why I highlighted that. There'll be a lot more information spread out over that time frame, and either at the end of that we'll get some better information with that's already been shared there, and or there'll be some other handouts that evolve, and whether it's part of an agenda here or even more information that goes out in more of a question and answer format too will be there. So I wish I had a quick answer for it, but it's there definitely is people working through it, because some of these, what feels like too, like it's a bigger increase people get excited about. Well, there was already some gaps that were there in different areas. So this filled the gaps in some places, but then increased it in others. And so that's why tomorrow they'll highlight, and then we'll try to get out some information over time there.
And then just a couple quick other things. For those of us who are not members of the Minnesota Transportation Alliance, I assume that there is access to tomorrow's event through a MnDOT invitation. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, you could sign up for it. I mean, there's a online version. I think it's only $25 or something like that. And then afterwards, there's going to be a recorded event to it and that, so you don't have to specifically be a member. So.
Okay, and then finally, in the exec, my question was about the first topic, proportionate MPO money, and the figure 15 million came, I think, from John Solberg. So that seems a small amount proportionate for the MPO. So I'm hoping that we can see tomorrow, put that into context. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Hollinshead. And then Member Geisler, did you have an add-on comment?
Yeah, just a quick question for Elaine with respect to the survey that's going out. Is that going to go out to the wide tab, including alternates as well as members, or just members?
I'll send it to all.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. Good point. Thank you, Member Geisler. All right. I know when I talked to the commissioner, it was either late last week or first part of this week, she talked about that analysis that had been done in the past where we were 18 billion short of having our infrastructure system in the position it should be in. And this 5 billion still leaves a $13 billion hole. I think that was just sort of general information that she provided and doesn't specifically answer Member Hollinshead's question, which is a good one. And that is, what are we eventually going to have to work with here at the tab in terms of additional funding over and above what we would normally have to work with. So, all right, thanks for those questions. That cause anything, Member Hollinshead, anything further you want to add there?
Nope, that's it for now. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then Member Bewin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be here today representing MPCA, but I don't have anything specific in the way of a report out for today. Anyone have any questions or anything? Or
Sure, let's ask if anybody has anything on their mind MPCA related. All right. Looks like you're getting a holiday bonus, no questions. Holiday pass. All right, let's move on to Carl Crimmins and Member Crimmins and the Metropolitan Airport Commission report update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I just wanted to touch on, as you said, the airport, we're still doing vaccinations and booster shots. Terminal 1 is after security. Terminal 2 is pre-security. And then you go into the parking ramps, follow the signs, and you can get, there's several different tests. There's one in the blue ramp, one in the gold ramp, and I think there's one more, and I'm not sure exactly what color it is. But air traffic is picking up. I flew out of there on Sunday. It was a 35-minute wait to get through security in the north checkpoint. The line was quite long. So just remind everybody to make sure you get to the airport early. And I went through and I used that pre-approved parking, and it worked pretty smooth. I just showed the icon to the machine, let me right in, and you're guaranteed a parking spot if you do that. So just recommend that to everybody.
So talk a little bit more about that. Is that an app you put on your phone? I think Member Anderson has used it in the past too.
Yes, if you go to pre-approved parking, and then you can do it on your phone, or you can get a hard copy if you want to print out an app off your printer, and you can carry that with you and just hold that barcode up to the screen on the machine, and it will let you in and let you out. You know, so and you save a couple dollars on parking, daily parking. So you save a little money, plus you get a guaranteed spot. So it's not a bad deal. And when you're exiting the parking lot, they have a single lane just for pre-approved parking. So you get out earlier also. You're not in the line.
Okay, good. So you just go to the MAC website and then go to pre-approved parking as a drop down and then go from there?
Yeah, if you go to MSPA, all uppercase, MSPA airport parking, it'll take you right to the site, and then you can manipulate it from there. Sunday, we had the Teamsters Local 320 they authorized a strike vote because labor negotiations are ongoing right now at the MAC. Just so everybody doesn't freak out, they're going to go to mediation on December 28th. They're still negotiating in good faith, but they cannot strike until January 20th legally. So the strike wouldn't happen until after the holidays. And naturally, the Teamsters are the ones that clear the snow off the runways. So I don't think it would be a good thing if they go all out on strike. So I'm thinking staff is the same way, and they're negotiating that, and they're still talking and everything else. So again, usually a strike authorization is part of the negotiation process. It's just letting the employer know that they're willing to walk if they have to. So I just wanted to bring that up. The airline travel is up about to 80% of 2019 levels. It's continuing to improve. It's slower because with this variant, it slowed down a little bit. But it's like I said, Sunday it was quite busy. I was really surprised when I got off the elevator and the line was past the elevators from the checkpoint. So if you can go TSA pre-check or go with that eyeball, the clear, you miss a lot of people. I must have walked past 150 people because I have TSA pre-check. So if you're going to go, either go early or get something else to help you out. And then, Mr. Chair, I would defer. I don't know if you want Bridget to talk right now about the capital improvement program. If so, I would defer anything else to Bridget.
All right, let's do that. Let's hold that until it comes up on the agenda as our singular action item. All right, any questions for Member Crimmins on airport operations? All right, very good. On to the Metropolitan Council, Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few things today. As you mentioned in your report, the first one is we want to welcome Charles Carlson, who is the new director of MTS. He comes to us from Metro Transit, where he had been director of the Bus Rapid Transit program. So he's a familiar face to many of you, but he is taking on a new role. But it's also a welcome back to his roots. He actually started at MTS as an intern many years ago. So it's nice to have him here. So I want to give him a big welcome. I do also want to give a big thank you to Amy Benowitz to ably helping us through our interim time period here. Obviously, she does a lot of work with TAB and with this group here, and certainly couldn't have made it through all of this transition without her. So I'll turn it to Charles quick, see if he wants to do a quick introduction or say hi. I'm putting him on the spot, so.
Sure. Just thank you, Councilmember Barber, Mr. Chair, and members. I'm really happy to officially be in the position now here on day 3, and look forward again to working with all of you in the years ahead. Thanks.
Very good. I've got a couple more things, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second one I have is the Orange Line. So as I hope many of you are aware, the Orange Line opened on December 4th. The Orange Line runs from Burnsville to downtown Minneapolis. The event was fantastic. There were opening events both in Minneapolis at Lake Street Station and at Burnsville at the heart of the city. Really excited to have this new addition to our transit system. I think it's going to really show us really how highway bus rapid transit will be a great benefit for our programs as well. The next one I have is the travel behavior inventory. So this is something we talk about quite a bit at TAB. So I just wanted to give kind of a quick report where we are. So we're getting really good responses. So far, we've gotten over 6,500 household responses and are well on track to receive or to exceed our sample target of 7,500 complete households. That survey continues to go through the end of February. So if anybody has received the survey, please turn it in. We want to get as much feedback as we can, because it really informs our work here at TAB and as we're looking at different transit and transportation projects. And then wanted to also let you know that the transit onboard survey will follow after this and will be launched in Q1 of 2022. Now we have a couple of other big things that have happened over the last week. So we have the Metro Purple Line, which is a bus rapid transit line that will operate between St. Paul and White Bear Lake, has received approval to enter the project development phase of the FTA's New Starts program. The project leadership will now transition from Ramsey County to Met Council. As currently planned, the Purple Line will serve 21 stations, mostly following Robert Street and Phelan Boulevard from downtown St. Paul. right now, in early 2023, federal approval will be sought to move into engineering, allowing the design work to be complete. And we're hoping to be able to open the line in 2026. I have one more. So, because it has been a busy week at council. So, the Metro Blue Line Extension Program released the draft route modification report, which describes the overall project process, public input received, and the technical evaluation that will inform the recommendation of a community-supported route in 2022. I would encourage everybody to go to the Blue Line. It's bluelineext.org, so you can look at the information that was released. For that, we are seeking public comment through January 25th, 2022, and then after that, we will move to ultimately release the final route modification report in March 2022. So that was a lot, but like I said, it's been a busy month.
Did that prompt any questions or comments relative to Chair Barber's report, or Member Barber's report? Good. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to all of our agencies for their reports today. I'm going to turn now to John Solberg, who is the TAC chair, and have him couple his report with an explanation on the 3 consent agenda items, which are all streamlined and available to be dealt with on the consent agenda. And so, Chair Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so for TAC report, again, TAC heard all the items and has heard all the items at various points that are in front of you today. I will go over just briefly those consent items so everybody has a little bit better understanding potentially on those items as you look at the consent agenda. The first item, 21-55, is a MnDOT project in Dakota County that is adding turn lanes and effectively is a cost reduction through the engineering process that the budget has been reduced. And so that's the first item for you. The second item is 2156, and that's essentially a preservation project, mill and overlay in the city of Minneapolis, in which the project limits were shortened. The project was split. This particular project also had a description of pond repair in it, which was taken out. So that's the second item. And then the third item is a project put forth by Woodbury to request an amendment in which the federal project that was solicited through the region, the city is asking to add an additional mill and overlay work and some ADA improvements to that project. So that changes the project limits and the cost. One thing to note in that particular project, again, is that the federal funds will only pay for those portions that were selected through the regional solicitation. The mill and overlay and ADA work are paid for with local funds. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Chair Solberg on any of those items, 55, 56, or 57?
Move approval, Anderson.
Second, Karwoski.
We got a motion by Member Anderson, second by Commissioner Karwoski to approve the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Ms. Ernst?
Anderson,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Barnes,
Aye.
Morest,
Aye.
Crimmins. Carl, are you there? Dugan,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Fox,
Aye.
Geisler,
Aye.
Giuliani Stevens,
Aye.
Patel,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Holberg,
Yes.
Hollinshead,
Aye.
Jalali, Jepson, Karwoski,
Aye.
Healy, Watson, Look.
Yes. Sorry, couldn't
Aye.
find the unmute
No.
button.
I got you. Thank you. And I got you too, Matt. Bwin,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
Narayanan,
Aye.
Dietrich,
Aye.
Reich,
Aye.
Sanger, Lewis,
Aye.
Schember,
Aye.
Stephenson,
Aye.
Beard,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Winshuttle,
Aye.
and Uterman.
Workman, aye.
Oh, Workman is in now. Thank you.
Oh, welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, the consent agenda items are approved. Thanks, everybody. We have only one action item in front of us, and that is the potential approval of the Minneapolis Airport or the Metropolitan Airports Commission Capital Improvement Program. And John Solberg will handle that matter as well. And then we've got Bridget Reef, and here, I guess Carl will defer to her. We've got staff here from the MAC to be able to deal with any questions that TAB members may have. So turn it back to Chair Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the action item in front of you is review and acceptance of the MAC Capital Improvement Plan as required by Minnesota State statute. The TAC did review this item for you 2 weeks ago. The 3 points that really stand out that are required as part of the Met Council's review are determine the adequacy of public participation, the approval of capital improvement projects of over certain thresholds for MSP and at the reliever airports, and then third, really reviewing and commenting on the projects for consistency with the TPP. The TAC did review, again, the capital improvement plan, and as listed in your program or your packet, you can see the capital improvement plan. Their public involvement plan is quite thorough as you go through really the schedule and who they're all talking to in various points of the capital improvement plan. So TAC did agree that does meet adequacy for public participation. Additionally, TAC reviewed the various projects that are called out over the certain thresholds as established, ranging from upwards of $45 million down to that $2 million threshold at the reliever airports. And again, most of those projects, as we saw them, were kind of the nuts and bolts, I think, as Chair Hovland said earlier in our executive meeting. They really are the preservation type projects for the airport. One note project in there that I think brought up some discussion was really the air handling unit replacement, and in light of discussion around COVID, followed up with Bridget on that. And that really is, again, much like the other projects, a modernization of infrastructure at the airport, providing efficiency and reduction of greenhouse gases on their part. And then third, the last piece, again, review and consistency with the transportation policy plan. And I think, again, this shows up in the kind of preservation type projects that are in place in the capital improvement plan, from runway reconstruction to the, as I said, the air handling unit replacement and baggage handling. There wouldn't be anything in the TPP that says we can't replace an air handling unit or those sorts of things. So with that, Mr. Chair, the TAC did recommend that TAB recommend approval to the Met Council on the capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Chair Solberg, for that good explanation. And Ms. Reef, would you like to supplement Chair Solberg's comments at all about the capital improvement program, the proposed changes in the CIP at the MAC?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. As we normally do, we have a very significant program planned. We have a 7-year capital plan that we develop a funding plan for the first 3 years of it. And the first 3 years of our capital program include projects over $1 billion. So we deferred over $300 million worth of work in the last 2 years because of COVID and the slowdown in the passengers. And so a big chunk of that dollar amount is catching up with our infrastructure and maintaining the assets that we have. We also have in 2024 2 significant projects, significant in dollar amount and size. One is a 2-gate expansion at Terminal 2, along with modifications to the south end of that terminal in prep work for additional gates at some point in time. And the other project, excuse me, is excuse me, is the construction of a safety and security building that will house our airport police folks primarily, as well as our airside operations and an airport operations center. So that building is actually two buildings that are being constructed connected to each other. The first building is a new fire station for the airfield, which is getting under construction in 2022. So those are the brief highlights, and Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Reef. For tab members, any questions for Ms. Reef or for Chair Solberg regarding the proposed capital improvement plan for the MAC? Member Naryanan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a question more out of ignorance, but why, how come this is like outside of the regional solicitation process? Is it because the funding source is different, or is it, yeah, how does it fit in with all the other things that we're doing here?
All right, that's a good question. I'm going to go to Amy Venowitz.
Chair, I can answer that. This is Russ Owen, staff member in MTS.
Thanks, Russ, for being with us today. I didn't notice you were with us, so thank you.
Yep. Chair and tab members, I think you hit the head right on the money. This is the funding that the MAC receives for MSP is primarily federal funding through the FAA and through their local funds, and then also the CIP review process is it's in the state statute and state statute that other I don't believe the regional solicitation is in that part of the statute. So we review the Met Council reviews this primarily due to the state statute reasons, and then the funding reasons are come from a different bucket.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Owen. And then I think member or Commissioner Karwoski, did you have your hand up?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I always enjoy the airport updates, the MAC updates. Thank you. Regarding the infrastructure bill that was passed, I know there's a lot of significant money targeted towards airports. It'd be really interesting if are you anticipating money, and can you at least describe anything you have planned in basic detail if that's true that you're getting money?
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Reef?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So yes, we are anticipating to receive money from the $25 billion that's been allocated for airports. For the first 2 years, we are specifically being allocated around $35 million, and that amount is based off of our passenger enplanement numbers from 2019. As we get into 2024 and 2025, so it's a 5-year allocation, those amounts of allocation will differ depending on our enplanements for 2022 and 2023. So it'll vary a little bit depending on how many people we have flying in and out of the airport. Funds beyond that are we will submit projects for competition. We will have to compete for other funds that are available, but they have money specific to terminal projects, money specific to air traffic control tower projects, and some of those kind of things. So we're really just getting into the strategy discussions about which pots of that money fit best with the projects that we have.
Thank you for the update. I guess we should all fly and encourage others to do so.
Absolutely.
There you go. Thank you. Thanks for that update. All right. Is there a motion to approve action item 2021-54, which would make a recommendation from the tab to the council to approve the MAC capital improvement program?
So move Windshuttle.
Seconded Bailey. We got Mayor Windshuttle moves, Mayor Bailey seconds the approval of the capital improvements program for the MAC, embodied in action item 2021-54. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Member DeGan?
Yes, thank you. I've been flying recently and just want to congratulate and pay the highest compliments to Ms. Reef on running a heck of an airport. And of course to Mr. Crimmins, Member Crimmins. Thank you, Bridget. Nice job. Although I must say, one of the last times I flew was the Sunday when power was out until 6 a.m. Yeah, that was, yeah. I've never run so fast for a plane in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Dugan. All right, any further comments or questions? Roll call, please, Ms. Hearn.
Anderson,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Barnes,
Aye.
Morast. Morast,
Aye.
Crimmins.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you, John. Thanks. Crimmins.
Mhm.
Dugan,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Fox,
Aye.
Geisler,
Aye.
Giuliani Stevens,
Aye.
Goodell,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Holberg, Hollinshead,
Aye.
Jalali, Jepson, Karwoski, Stan.
Aye.
Thank you. Keely, Watson,
Yes.
Look,
Commissioner Look.
Can you hear me? Aye.
Oh, gotcha. Thanks. Bewan,
Aye.
Metis Castillo,
Aye.
Narayanan,
Aye.
Petrick,
Aye.
Reich,
Aye.
Lewis,
Aye.
Schember,
Aye.
Stephenson,
Aye.
Williams. Oh, sorry, Beard. Yeah, I got you, Janet. Thanks.
Aye.
Sorry, I skipped over Michael. Thank you. Windshuttle
Aye.
and Workman.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. We've got an approved action item here in 2021-54, which passes, and we will make that recommendation to the council that they approve the MAC Capital Improvements Program. Ms. Reef, thanks for being with us today and the update. Appreciate it. It's a wonderful, wonderful facility that we have in our metropolitan area, and we're really grateful for it. Everybody in the state of Minnesota, I think, is grateful for all the good work that gets done out there, as Member Dugan said. So have a nice holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we're going to move on to information items now. And I was on a call here just a few days ago with Tim Sexton from MnDOT. He is their coordinator on the sustainability and public health side at MnDOT, and Tim's going to make a presentation today about the work of the Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council. There may be an emphasis, Member Narayanan is on that advisory council and has some responsibilities relative to vehicle miles traveled and their strategies around potential reduction of VMT. And we may hear from him as well. But I'm going to turn it over now to Tim Sexton. Welcome, Tim, to the tab.
Thank you, Chair Hovland. And just want to get a quick time check from folks. Can you just confirm how long I have, and then also if you have a preference for how we should do any questions?
I think I think we could hold questions to the end. And can you do your presentation in about 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, I can. I'll target that.
All right. Thank you.
Terrific. And I do want to welcome, encourage Member Narayanan to speak up, because Ash was is still co-chairs a work group that I'll talk a little bit about that's around VMT and transportation options. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So just setting the table here, I think folks here are aware of 2007 passed the Next Generation Energy Act that set up goals in statute to reduce greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide, with goals for 2015, 2025, and 2050. We're not on track to meet those goals, and transportation is the #1 contributor amongst all the economic sectors in the state. to greenhouse gas emissions. And so MnDOT has sort of taken on some of the leadership to work with a broad range of partners to try and make some progress towards those goals. And so if we can go to the next slide. So one of the ways that we're trying to do that is in 2020, we started a group called the Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council. Now the format of this group, I would suggest, is kind of unique. The DOT is really the facilitator of the group, and our goal is to support engagement with the partners that are listed here, but to not play a real active role in the content that's created. So the way that this works, and I'm not going to read through these, but you can just get a sense of the breadth of the membership here. We can go to the next slide. And so the way that this works is really, it's a different approach, like I mentioned. But what we do is it's an ongoing group, I should say, and there's an annual cycle. So each year, the stack has work groups, one around VMT and transportation options, one around fueling and powering transportation, and another on resilience. A fourth is actually just starting up around funding and financial implications of the recommendations, but we'll revisit that in a future conversation. But the groups work together through the spring, summer, and fall to develop recommendations. Now, again, the MnDOT role is really about facilitation. So we provide the structure and sort of host the meetings, but it's really driven by the members, largely by the co-chairs as well, of which Ash is one for the VMT and transportation options. So MnDOT provides the structure. We get the recommendations from the group. They vote on recommendations in December, and we actually just voted on some new ones this morning. But they vote on the recommendations. We then, as MnDOT, take those recommendations and discuss those internally. Take about 3 months to do that, and then in March, we respond. And that's sort of how MnDOT engages. So it's a different kind of a structure. We view it as a bit more sort of like a co-power or power sharing type of arrangement than some of our other types of engagement. But I think it's important that you recognize sort of how that works. And so importantly, this happens every year. And there's a parallel track as, so we will be implementing or working to implement recommendations at the same time as the stack is developing recommendations for the coming year. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we have a couple of work groups. We structured the work groups intentionally and really kind of around this concept of this four-legged stool. It's a kind of a tired metaphor, but it's one that we often use to describe sort of sustainable transportation efforts. And so you see that there's vehicles and fuels. This is largely addressed by our fueling and powering transportation work group. And then there's this VMT and system operations that's largely addressed by the group focused on VMT and transportation options. Resilience is another key piece. Again, I'm not going to talk about that one too much today either. They're on a slightly different track. But again, happy to provide more information on that in the future if you're interested. I would also say that the base of that stool, or the seat of the stool, well, it's not listed here. I think what's important to all the stack members is that transportation equity and justice are really a key priority that runs through all the recommendations. And so one way to think about this graphic here is that the seat of that stool is really around equity that brings all these things together. Next slide, please. So last year, 2020, we received our first set of recommendations, and we responded in March of 2021. I'm going to walk through just these real quickly. If people have questions, happy to revisit this at the end. I want to focus mostly on the VMT related recommendations because I think that's what we've heard is most interested from this group. So we had one, like I mentioned, fueling and powering transportation. This is around vehicles and fuels. You can see the recommendations here. One was around develop a clean fuels policy. Hopefully folks have heard, but the Department of Transportation and the Department of Agriculture have been directed by the governor to explore a clean fuels policy for the state, and is engaging the public and stakeholders on that right now. Other recommendations and sort of their top tier or highest priority recommendations were around establishing rebates for electric vehicles or EVs and increasing investment in electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now you can see here our responses were either support or explore further. And so we've really been trying to encourage this where it best fits with MnDOT. I will say that the IIJA referenced previously has funding for both of these areas, for charging, and the rebates are part of the Build Back Better or social infrastructure package that's also being discussed right now in DC. Next slide, please. So the group around vehicle miles traveled, the biggest sort of umbrella recommendation here was about recommending the state adopt a statewide goal to reduce VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, by 20% by the year 2050. Now we adopted that or accepted that as a preliminary goal, both overall statewide and wanting to explore what it would look like on a per capita basis. So we also recognize in our response, that MnDOT, we own and operate 10 to 12% of the roads in Minnesota. So we don't have complete control over this. So we recognize that engagement with local governments, with the public, with other stakeholders is really important. And so we're kind of combining that engagement. We did some individual engagement with folks in the summer, and then tried to work this into engagement around the statewide multimodal transportation plan that I know is next on the agenda as part of that outreach and engagement effort. I'll talk a little bit more about where we are on this in a moment. You can see the other recommendations here around prioritizing transit and working to prioritize other strategies besides highway capacity to reduce congestion. We really are viewing this as sort of like an implementation piece that's connected to that goal setting effort. But you can see we're doing some other stuff too on that one. But we can go to the next slide. So again, what we heard coming into this is that this VMT goal was really, there's a lot of interest in learning more about this, what it looks like, what it could be. So that's really the focus of today. And I want to let people know kind of where we are. And I mentioned the engagement that's happening. The last thing on this slide is that we're really hoping and planning that the release of the final goal will be accompanied by actual implementation strategies, right? We want to make sure that if we're putting out a goal that we also are helping inform at least MnDOT folks about what that means in our plans and on our projects. So making sure that implementation accompanies the goal. We're really sort of trying to correlate the release of that guidance with the release of the SMTP. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that let folks know that other states and local governments in Minnesota have similar goals. You can see here nationally, but maybe more importantly is locally, Eden Prairie, Hennepin County, City of Minneapolis, and cities of St. Paul also have goals that align with, or in some cases are more ambitious than the 20% recommended by the stack. Next slide, please. So here's kind of our timeline for, like I mentioned before, kind of developing this, sort of finalizing the goal and then developing some accompanying implementation guidance and tools. So we've been working this year to sort of get some groups in place internally, are still working to identify strategies and tools. We're making some really good progress internally and have just broadened that a little bit to include some key folks at the Met Council. And then are also starting to do outreach to groups and public and external stakeholders associated with the SMTP work that's happening. You can see here, though, that we're really hoping to finalize all these guidance and tools in March or March timeframe. We probably shouldn't be so specific. This will align with the SMTP, largely because they're doing so much really robust engagement that we want to make sure that we're hearing all those voices and to make the most informed final decisions. Next slide, please. So here's kind of what we're thinking about. These are some of the things that we do or things that happen in the state and in the region that impact VMT, and you can see this here. So like some of these are pretty, basic, but we wanted to capture the full suite of actions that are happening here and how they impact VMT. So you can see population growth, economy, culture, technology, these things that, they can go any way, right? They have different impacts. More importantly, probably, is the things that MnDOT plays a role in. These are promoting multimodal transportation options, I think have a role to decrease VMT, transportation demand management or TDM strategies, can have the potential to decrease adding capacity. I think what we've seen with the concept of induced demand is that adding capacity generally increases vehicle miles traveled. And land use can go both ways. And it's also something MnDOT doesn't really have a lot of control over, which we can go to the next slide. So this is what we're also thinking about as we're developing the strategy and working towards this final goal, is what the role of the agency is as it relates to those previous strategies. So we've broken it down into 3 basic sort of functions. And obviously these are gradients or ranges, right? And we're not, but it's helping us think about our role. So we're either a leader, right? Things that we make direct investments in, for example. There's a lot of places where we're a partner, where our policies or plans might get used by locals as an example. And there's others where we have really a supportive role. We don't have direct authority or maybe a direct connection to choices, but working with partners to help align sort of like a regional or statewide approach to some of these really complex transportation challenges and opportunities facing all of us in Minnesota. Next slide, please. So here's one of the ways that we're starting to think about it. And this is draft. We're just starting to release it, but I think it's really helpful. And one of my colleagues, I believe, is on the call here, Nissa Tupper, is really leading a lot of this internal work and can provide more information if you want it. But I think this is a really helpful graphic that she put together. In terms of like, what does it look like if we were to adopt this 20% goal? What would it look like for the average person? And thinking about average people in different places. So in this case, it's like a rural community, but also we have an example of a suburban or urban. And you can see here in 2021, just showing us on the graphic, right? Just assuming you drive every day. What does the 20% look like? What are some of those options? And so you can see here then on the 2050, broadband provides some opportunities maybe for telework or to visit the doctor virtually instead of taking a trip, right? Maybe there's an opportunity for kids to walk to school or to carpool to school. And really, though, it's also trying to help people understand, even if we were to have this goal and it were to be applied to individuals, like it might not be that disruptive. Next slide, please. In the suburban context, this is another just way to help people think about what this could mean to someone. The other thing that's not shown here is, when we do the just very rough math about what a 20% reduction could mean for the average driver, it's driving maybe 1 hour less per week. And so, I think when you think about it in those terms, in terms of affordability, time spent in traffic or in the car, and I don't know. I think it's something that is maybe a little bit more attractive to people, thinking about, well, do you really value that extra hour that you spend in the car every week? I don't know. This just gives another example of that same sort of graphic, but applied to a suburban context. And again, it's also meant to reinforce that even if we were to have this goal, we don't know exactly how it's going to be applied or how it would be applied to projects or plans, like we mentioned earlier. But it doesn't mean that people couldn't go to their cabin, right? It doesn't mean that they can't drive their kids to school. I think the goal is how do we provide options that make it safe, convenient, reliable, and affordable for people to get around, regardless of whether or not they have money to buy a car or they don't want to drive a car, right? Or they want that exercise or that sort of mental space that you get from walking, biking, taking transit, et cetera. Next slide, please. And here's just the final one, is just the kind of the urban context, right? And I think the key here, and this is my last real slide, is that, there's a lot more opportunities in urban areas to take transit, right? So bike or walk to the services that you want or need, or to recreate, right? So there's a thought that with more opportunity, it's probably more realistic that folks in urban areas are more likely to do non-single occupancy vehicle trips. And I think we can go to the next slide, at the 2 slides now. Yep. And that's it for me. So happy to take any questions, or Ash, if you have any suggestions or anything you want to add, definitely welcome that too.
Yeah, I think that's good. Greg, thanks for taking down the PowerPoint presentation. And Tim, thanks again for being with us today. And Member Narayanan, is there anything you want to do in the way of supplementation of the presentation and talk a little bit about the work of your subgroup on the VMT.
Thank you, Tim, really, for giving us an overview of the presentation and the recommendations. I just wanted to, emphasize one point, which is when folks hear VMT reduction, it shouldn't mean at all that we're reducing travel or reducing access to places. We're just giving people many more ways of accessing the opportunities and the destinations that our state has to offer. So that's kind of the primary, message that I wanted to, put forward to this group, and really appreciate all the work that Tim and Nissa have done and the leadership that MnDOT has shown in truly tackling our climate crisis.
Good. Thank you, Member Narayanan. TAB members, I'm going to say council members. Looking at Mayor Williams and thinking, got the city council going here, a big city council. TAB members, questions or comments regarding this work that's been done to date around sustainability? Or for Member Narayanan, Member Geisler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Narayanan, I think it's great that you're considering all aspects, some of which are things like telework. I just punched some rough numbers because, as most of the TAB members know, I'm a numbers guy. Just by us teleworking TAB, I've avoided 375 pounds of CO2 just for driving my car in and out of TAB in a year. Working 3 days a week at work for me instead of 5 is 3,500 pounds of CO2 a year. That's just me. And I'm not that far outside of the world. I mean, I'm up in Coon Rapids here, but I'm not that far away from a lot of stuff. And as you consider more and more of those opportunities and the fact that people are going to leverage these things, I think there's a lot of ways to slice this problem down that aren't a whole 100% shift in what we're doing. It's just little steps in a lot of places for personal, as well as, businesses encouraging it, and there's other ways to encourage these activities. So I'm really, really glad to see this kind of work that's looking at it and not just answering with transit only, but looking at a wide variety of ways that we can address this issue. So thank you, everyone.
Sorry, I had my video off there. I don't know what happened. Member Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really enjoyed the presentation. And the question I had was, what is the working group or MnDOT doing in terms of sharing out some of these findings and outreach? In specific, the rural example I thought was really compelling, but I wondered, what is the group doing in terms of sharing that type of message, sharing that type of investment or change in approach to some types of communities in particular?
It's a terrific question. I think this is either the first or the second group to have seen that graphic. And I think we're sorting through some things internally about where this is going. We have been sharing also through the SMTP engagement, trying to get feedback on how people feel about a goal and what that goal could look like. So I think that in the coming months, we'll be working to share this information and our progress much more than we have been, because like I said, some of this stuff is really new. So if you or others have forums where you'd like us to join and share some of this and get some feedback, we would be happy to try and make that happen. We don't have maybe, I would say, a formal outreach plan on this beyond trying to partner with the folks on the multimodal transportation plan.
Member Lewis, any follow on?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, Member Dugan and then Mayor Winchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sexton, for the presentation. Like Member Geisler, I appreciate the wide view that you're taking, or that the group is taking on different ways to look at this situation. And as a preliminary, though, I do want to commend to everyone again, Member Narayan's article that he co-authored in September in the Star Tribune on transportation policy and and a low carbon future. Congratulations, Ash. You were with the commissioner of MnDOT and then the president of Xcel Energy. That's a pretty big company. So good. Thank you for that. Tim, I did have some questions though. CAVs, connected autonomous vehicles, which MnDOT, I remember I have it in my notes presentation around July 2019, will actually probably increase vehicles on the road because of the ability for them to platoon and be so close together. So that's one thought. And then in terms of, I'm not a numbers person like Member Gasha, so I don't know how many pounds of CO2 I've saved, but I'm working remotely too. But it seems like the electric vehicle rebates and the remote working, we always talk about equity here. From an equity standpoint, they disadvantage those who aren't educated, live in the suburbs, can afford an electric vehicle to get a rebate. They're pretty expensive. And the other, unintended consequences, the city of Minneapolis is really in dire needs of people coming back downtown. And I will say from informal surveys, I'm an advocate of downtown, but a lot of folks are concerned about public transportation in the post-COVID era. And without some kind of commuting opportunity, Minneapolis it's going to be a long time before the population comes back. I think only 34% of the workers are back to Minneapolis. So it's not a complaint, it's just an observation as we take in all, unintended consequences. How do we approach this? And again, particularly if I may, the connected and autonomous vehicles will revolutionize travel. And everything that I've seen is it will increase vehicle miles traveled because it will be, I want to go downtown, so I take a vehicle, I call for the vehicle, it goes downtown, it waits there, and then someone else wants it, it goes out to Lakeville, and someone else wants it, and it's just, so anyway, it was just thoughts. And thank you very much for the, Tim and Ash, for this very helpful explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair. All right, Mayor Winchittle.
I didn't have anything to say.
Okay, I
don't
thought
know
I
if
saw your hand pop up.
Oh,
Sorry.
nope.
All right, other questions, comments? For either Member Narayanan or for Mr. Sexton, and maybe Todd Bewan, if he's still on, has there been any, I'd say, coordination between MPCA and MnDOT on the sustainability issue relative to what Member Dugan was just touching on, and that is, as we see an increase in the use of electrification to run vehicles, how does that interface with the VMT and the goal of the VMT to reduce greenhouse gas production? Have you looked at that issue? And that's maybe not in a very articulate way to express it, but it strikes me as the same direction that Member Dugan is heading, is that as we see more electrification and more support for that we're going to see less greenhouse gas produced. And so even if we end up in a situation where we have enhanced VMT, are we still going to end up better off because we got reduced GHG?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there is a lot of collaboration and connection between Mr. Sexton and MPCA and MnDOT and MPCA in more general terms. We work closely with Mr. Sexton. One of the things I was going to turn on my camera and ask, because I wondered if the group that you're on, Tim, considered moving that date up from 2050 up at all in terms of reducing VMT by 20%. That seems like a long way out. And we're going to have these different directions in our trends here. I think we're going to have VMTs going down is what we want to see, VMT, and we want to see EVs, percentage of EVs being, used across the state going up. And I think both of those trends will hold true. But while we're waiting for that EV sort of response, which is going to take a number of years, wondering if we can accelerate the VMT reductions in the meantime. So that was just my only reaction, was that 2050 seems pretty far out, and whether we could try to accelerate that at all.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks, Carolyn. So a couple things. There's a lot going on here, and I think this reflects the complexity of the challenges that face us. And so, one, I just want to say, yeah, we really value the partnership with the Pollution Control Agency, the Department of Commerce, Department of Administration. All of us as agencies do work really closely together and really try to have sort of strategic, enterprise-wide, approaches to these really complicated challenges that span the traditional silos of government, right? These new challenges, whether it's connected and automated vehicles or electric vehicles or just the sustainable transportation more broadly, don't necessarily fit into the buckets of the agencies that we've, created based on, needs of the past. But we're doing a good job of spanning that, and that's an obstacle that I think we're doing a good job overcoming. The electric, there is, though, I just want to acknowledge, there's a bit of a tension between the electrification and sort of this VMT concept. In many ways, if we were only focused on greenhouse gases, we could entirely focus on electrifying everything, right? Like if you have zero emission vehicles and like 100% zero emission vehicles or electric vehicles that are powered by renewable energy, like greenhouse gases go way down. However, we are also thinking about this vehicle miles traveled piece and promoting transportation options about climate, but also about livability, about safety and economic vibrancy of our communities, about the equity piece that not everybody can afford a vehicle and they deserve the right to move around, to go to their job without having 2 hours on the bus. They have that right. And that's something that as a public agency, we feel is really important. And so there's these co-benefits of vehicle miles traveled that extend beyond climate. I think the other thing is that even if we were to try to go all electric, that's a long ways out. And that goes probably beyond 2050. We're still going to have liquid fuels powering transportation to some degree, right? And so I think we want to make sure that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. Like any sort of diversified portfolio, we need to do multiple things. And I think we're able to. But there is that complexity. There's also a little bit of a tension between the different groups sort of promoting the different pieces of this, and they don't always see across the sort of the party lines, for lack of a better term. So, but a lot of them do. But it's a complicated issue. And the last thing I'll just say to Member Dugan's comment about CAVs, this I think is another something on the horizon that we really need to think hard about. Connected and automated vehicles, one of the big advantages is it gives people access to transportation that might not have very good access now, especially if you've got a disability or you can't drive. There's a real opportunity here. At the same time, there's an opportunity for people to sit back and have a 2-hour commute that they can make productive or work or sleep. And I think that we just need to decide as a region and as a state, what's our vision of the future? Do we want a situation where people are spending all that time in their cars that doesn't promote equity, for the long-term vibrancy of our state? Or do we want to think differently about where we're putting our investments? And I think that's what we're trying to piece through, but it is complicated. We sure as heck don't have all the answers. And that's why we're grateful for working with folks from the stack like Ash and others. But also I think it highlights the need to work more with local governments. And so whether that's the TAB and or other sort of venues and forums to work with local agencies, I think that's also really important. And something we probably need to do more of to tackle, again, these really complex but exciting challenges and opportunities facing us in the future.
Well, that was actually, Tim, a wonderful segue when you asked the theoretical or the rhetorical question, where do we want as a state to be making our investments? We can, if there's no further questions for Tim or for Member Narayanan, we'll switch to the MnDOT statewide multimodal transportation plan update, because that plan drives the investment for the state of Minnesota.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Dugan, I had my hand up. I just wanted to add one more comment if I could.
Sure. I didn't know if you had a continuing question or not. Go ahead, Member DeGan.
Yes, thank you. First of all, primarily, I want to commend Mr. Sexton. The complexity of what you're trying to do is mind-boggling. So, and I personally appreciate it. I wanted your question about where we want to go as a state, I think is really important. And I noticed in the last presentation we have on the census that we grew by 313,000 people in 10 years, and that is projected to continue. And most of the growth, 78%, is in the metro. So with the continuing increase of population, which we, as everyone knows, we need, otherwise for jobs and for talent, particularly in the medical fields and the technology, the what do you call it, medical alley, water, that's critical to get the young, bright talent. And so as we attract more people, that's probably going to put more vehicles on the road. And as the other part of the demography is that our over 60, age 60 or 65 population is growing very quickly, and they'll be the ones relying on, if hopefully connected and autonomous vehicles. And as a matter of equity, I just think it always needs to be looked at, and you've addressed this wonderfully, sir. The folks that really need the transportation, our fellow citizens who, work at Walgreens, work at Holiday, work at, Cub Foods, who've got to be there, don't have the luxury of staying at home like I do. I do like working at home, except I will say the landlord is a real pain, but that's besides the point. But in terms of the equity, perhaps there could be some attention given to charging electric vehicles, the fuel tax like combustion engines pay, and using that for transportation, because that is I see that, frankly, as an inequity, much like out-of-state retailers not having to collect sales tax, how that impacts local retailers. Because if electric vehicles don't have to pay, fuel tax that goes to the roads and transportation, then it's really an unfair advantage. So again, from equity, that's where I'm coming from. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. DeGan. And I join you in expressing that I think Mr. Sexton is particularly well placed by MnDOT to handle this work, because it is complex. He's got a good mind, and he's got a good disposition for this kind of work. So,
Mr. Chair,
thank you for being with us today. Mayor?
Yeah, I've sat and listened to this conversation, and I think we sometimes forget about now, and I'm referring to where I'm located in comparison to where many here are located, that public transportation is not really available, and we still have to look at trips that people are taking on a regular basis, because that's not available here. And our growth just in my little 10 square mile is going at a very, very fast pace. So while I think it's important to look at what the presentation talked about, we still have to look at the areas that don't have the ability to have that. I mean, we have
Nope. Mayor, you froze up. Mayor? Mayor, we lost you. No, we can't hear you, Mayor. All right, we'll get him back here, but in the meantime, I think let's he can hold that thought and share it with us at the end. Let's switch over. Ashley Zeiden, welcome. Another great employee at MnDOT, here to tell us about the MnDOT statewide multimodal transportation plan, giving us an update on that. As I mentioned earlier, this is the plan that drives investment for the state, and you're going to hear from Ashley that there's a couple of new areas that they're looking at. One is related to climate, and then equity, and I think healthy and vibrant communities. We're going to hear about a lot of different things, and those are a couple of new areas for her. So, Ms. Zeiden, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. It's so nice to see you all. Thanks for inviting me here to the Transportation Advisory Board. I am excited to share with you all the work that we've done. If we'll go to the next slide. So, Mr. Chair, I'll keep it brief. I have less than 10 minutes, but I do want to visit about the draft policy hierarchy just to help you all visualize how all the puzzle pieces come together when we speak on behalf of policy. And then we'll dive into some of those objective areas that Mr. Chair touched on. We have a total of 6 objectives that I would like to visit with you all briefly about today. And then we'll conclude with an engagement and outreach summary and some of our next steps. So next slide, please. Some of you have seen this graphic before, but I always think it's a really helpful grounding slide to figure out where the statewide multimodal transportation plan lies. So I'm going to use the acronym SMTP. It will save us all a lot of time and keep me to my 10-minute window. But you can see up on top that we have the Minnesota Go 50-year vision, and that's really big and broad. And the overall question that that vision plan is answering is, what are we trying to achieve? So the vision plan is that Minnesota has a multimodal transportation system that maximizes the health of people, the health of the environment, and health of the economy. And then one level down, we have our statewide multimodal transportation plan. And that is the plan that I'm helping to oversee, and I'm a project manager for SMTP. So the answer here is, what are we going, or how are we going to achieve it? And one element I want you to remember from my presentation today, if you take nothing from me, is that the statewide multimodal transportation plan is for all modes of transportation and all transportation partners across the state of Minnesota. So it's not just a MnDOT plan. All of us have a role in contributing to advancing this plan. And then the SMTP integrates policy into our modal and system plans that you can see on the bottom of the graphic. So that's from our PED plan, bike plan, state highway investment plan, freight, all the way over to ports and waterways. Next slide, please. All right, let's jump into our policy hierarchy, how we build policy. Next slide. So similar to a lot of the work that you all are involved in, there's a hierarchy or a framework on how we build this content. So we're proposing 6 objectives, and those are really big picture, overarching statements, very futuristic, broad in nature. And those are supported by performance measures. And Tim's presentation gave you all a good preview of some of the really intense conversations that we're having. One level down, we have strategies. So those are more tactical in nature. We often connect to strategies much faster than we would objectives. And those provide the overall direction and general steps forward. We can feel ourselves stepping towards the finish line. One level down further towards the ground is we're proposing actions. Now that's a new component to the 2022 plan. We heard from our partners across the state that said, look, we need a little bit more guidance on how to implement these strategies. So actions help to solve how we're going to implement. And those have a really broad timeline, could be 1 to 20 years. So the SMTP is a 20-year plan horizon. So some of the actions could be a relatively simple lift. It could take 3 years to implement. Some could take 5, 7, 10, 15, 20. You all have great experience on the implementation side of some of our long-range plans, and you know how some of that work goes. And then a unique element that differentiates the SMTP from other long-range plans that some of you might be working on or have your hands in is we have this item called a work plan item. And those are MnDOT specific action items. Those are commitments that MnDOT had said, we will own this work. And we have about a 5-year time horizon on that. But there's this really nice marriage between actions and work plan that will move work forward together. So next slide. So just as a reminder, our strategies answer our what, and I'll touch on some of the general themes of our strategies later. And actions we're proposing new to 2022. They weren't at all present in the 2017 plan. So next slide, please. So here's our list of 6 objectives that we're proposing for the 2022 plan. Climate action is a brand new objective that was not present in 17. So we're proposing a new action. We have critical connections, which is coming along with us from the 17 plan. We have healthy, equitable communities, which is an amended objective. We had healthy communities in 17, and we're proposing healthy, equitable communities. You certainly can't have healthy communities without infusing an equitable lens, and you most certainly cannot have equitable communities without also focusing on health. So we've married those two practice areas. We also have open decision-making, system stewardship, and transportation safety, which are coming along with us from 17. So total of 6. Next slide, please. We're just on the brink of finalizing some of this draft content. We have a big committee meeting tomorrow where we'll actually be talking about the climate action objective. And once we finish this committee meeting, integrate some comments, we'll be in a wonderful position to share this content with you all. And I can work alongside staff to make sure the content is shared to the various boards and integrated into packets. But the climate action objective really focuses on building and creating a sustainable and resilient transportation system through utilizing tech, but also adapting and adaptation to help address our changing climate. So there are a total of 4 strategies for this section, and they really center on mitigation and adaptation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and protecting people from a changing climate. So this is where the greenhouse gas emissions conversations will start. But like we all are realizing, some of these really important topics don't have clean lines or clean bounds that they live in. They're overarching and integral into other objectives. Next slide, please. Critical connections. This objective really focuses on the foundation is improving those connections for prosperity and quality of life. We have a total of 6 strategies for this objective, and they're built on providing equitable access to destinations, expanded transportation options, really prioritizing modal solutions and investments, and then technology solutions as well. So part of the connected and automated vehicle conversation lives in the critical connections objective. Next slide. Here we have healthy, equitable communities. So this is our amended objective. It's really centered on making sure that we're creating vibrant places that reduce disparities and promote health outcomes. We have 6 strategies under this objective. They're really centered on modal shifts, workforce diversity broadly, interjecting an economic development focus, eliminating burdens and inequities, and then advancing the health of people. Next slide. We have open decision-making. This objective really focuses on creating inclusive processes, processes that are engaging and supported by data and analysis. We have a total of 5 strategies for this objective, and they're centered on building relationships. We know how important that is, prioritizing communication, and of course, involving people in the decision-making process. One notable shift with this is we've relocated transportation workforce related strategies that were present in the 2017 plan to system stewardship. So we've plopped those out and relocated them. So next slide. So perfect alignment, system stewardship. This is a very, very robust objective that is built around building and managing, operating, and adapting all of our assets as a part of a greater system. Strategies focus on improving our coordination of assets, of course, maintaining our infrastructure, and here's the infusion of the workforce component, focusing on a diverse and inclusive transportation workforce. Next slide. And then finally, transportation safety. This is our 6th and final. The objective is centered on fostering a culture of transportation, not only for our users, but also the communities that these systems travel through. We have 5 strategies. They're centered on coordinating with our partners, prioritizing the movement of people and goods, and then we also have a conversation on our E's here, equitable education, enforcement, and engineering techniques. So next slide. Some of you have seen this graphic before. I'm nearing in on time, so I'm going to fly through this. But this is an analysis tool that as staff we're using to make sure that these 3 pillars are loud, evident, and present in our work. Climate, equity, and health, we're calling our 3 pillars. And you'll see that evident in the plan as we're crafting language right now. Next slide. One more. So we did conduct in-person engagement this past fall, which was a big shift for us, and I'm sure would have been for many of you as well. But we held about 1 to 2 events out in Greater Minnesota, and we held 5 events in the metro. Of course, we were targeting outdoor community events, making sure everyone felt comfortable engaging with us. But we heard from upwards of 300 people. It was really great to connect and just be in community again. We recently also held a policy panel and stakeholder forum. Some of you were present in those stakeholder forums. We heard over 600 people from the survey, and we welcomed over 120 people for our stakeholder forums. So we're continuing to get input, and it's been really great. Next slide. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair. I'll touch just briefly on timeline. We're right on the brink of sharing content for you all. We have that really important committee meeting just tomorrow. And we're looking to send draft content out. Policy framework will come first in January to internal partners, and then the draft plan will be available for internal partner and coordination in January. We're looking to post for draft plan review in the springtime, March, April, and adoption in July.
All right, thank you, Ms. Zidon. That was a very excellent presentation. I'm thinking about your timing, projected adoption of the plan in July. And I think for all of us on the tab, we really appreciated your presentation, but we also realized that with respect to the metro or the region that we're responsible for, the TPP drives our work, but we need to have it consistent with your plan. And so to the extent that you can make your PowerPoint today available to Elaine so it could be circulated out to all the tab members, even though you don't have it in final form yet, I think it would really bring value to the work that we're about to embark upon in the regional solicitation as well, because we want to make sure that there's consistency and continuity in these 2 plans that affect the overall state and then the particular metropolitan region that we're responsible for. Thank you. Other questions or comments for Ms. Zidon on this presentation? All right, well, thanks for being with us today, and have a great holiday season. Let's move on now to our last presentation in the information portion of the agenda, and that's the 2020 census. Todd Graham from our Metropolitan Council Community Development Office has this brief presentation for us. Mr. Graham, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Hovland. I'm Todd Graham. I am a demographer and forecaster with Met Council's research office. I'm bringing you an informational presentation, lessons from the 2020 census. In 2020, all of you should have received multiple mailings asking us to complete a secure questionnaire, answer 10 questions about yourselves, your households. So fast forward to now, Census Bureau has published the first local data, and in this presentation, we're going to get into it. Stay on this slide for a minute, just stay here. Jumping in, the United States conducts a census, the counting of people, every 10 years. There are about 10 questions on age, sex, race, national origins. Do you own a home? How many people live with you? How are you all related to one another? And yeah, those are the questions that are asked. If the Census Bureau did not hear back from people, then by June of 2020, they sent out census takers to knock on doors and ask the questions in person. You are aware this work was disrupted by and delayed by the COVID pandemic. Still, the good news is Minnesota was mostly well counted, and Met Council, county GIS offices, we all worked with Census Bureau on various technical preparations in the run-up to 2020. Most importantly, building out the census's address file, providing the Bureau with a few thousand new addresses. That was a huge achievement, and that'll become clear on the next slide. Next slide, please. There we go. Yes, Minnesota was incredibly successful in its census participation. 74% of all the addresses on the list self-responded during 2020. And self-responded means, a household occupant filled out the questionnaire either online or in the mail. Minnesota had the highest self-response rate in the nation, and that is important because census process evaluations always find that the self-response yields higher quality information than any other way of getting the data. The follow-up methods at census are sending out the census takers, data mining administrative records that the federal government has, they do that, or using statistical imputation to fill in the final 1% that's missing. But again, the self-response gets us the better quality data. Now, on this slide, we get to the big mission accomplished moment. Census Bureau counted 5,706,494 Minnesota residents, and that was just enough, and I emphasize this, just enough to be awarded the 435th congressional district in the next Congress, the very last district in the nation. And that's all the more dramatic because it was like a come from behind win. I looked up 5 separate year 2020 projections that had been prepared before the census count, and every one of those projections, every one of those 5, all had an expectation of a little less than 5.7 million. So we beat the point spread. Next slide, please. So now let's get into the data. The first big release of local data was in August, what the Bureau calls the redistricting data file. And it includes what you see in the first column here, total housing units, total households, total population. Of course, the population totals are not all that census collected. The next big release next year is going to build out the demographic details for us with specific age groups and family structure and how people living together are related to one another. That's in the next data release a year from now. That's all that the decennial census really covers. Other socioeconomic characteristics that people are interested in, income, commuting, are not asked by the decennial census, but they are asked in a sample-based survey that is always in the field, and Census Bureau surveys about 3 million households per year to estimate all these characteristics of income, disability, housing costs, and so on. Next slide, please. So let's talk numbers. I said that the state population has topped 5.7 million. Most of that is in our 7-county region. And more remarkable still, the metro is strongly attracting new residents, gaining population to an extent not seen in the balance of the state. The metro gained 313,000 people. The rest of Minnesota gained only about 100,000. Next slide, please. So same numbers, but now I'm giving you a time series. The metro's growth was remarkable compared to the rest of Minnesota, compared to other major metros in the upper Midwest, and also compared historically. We gained 313,000 people. Tab member Dugan commented on this earlier in the meeting. And most of the population gain, now I'm looking at that final column of the time series, most of that population gain, about 2/3, is what demographers call natural growth. More babies being born than people dying. Another 30% of our population growth is international migration from the rest of the world. Finally, there's about 5% of this 300,000 that is net domestic growth. Such a small amount of movement between the states sounds small, sounds unimpressive, but it's not. It's not though, because the domestic migration, how we exchange people with other states, is really a wild card. The number could be positive. It could also be negative. We could lose people in other states. We didn't in this past decade though. There have been decades where Minnesota or the Twin Cities lost numbers of people moving out. The early 2000s, for example. I'll tell you briefly, that experience, gaining or losing through migration, is really highly correlated with economic fortunes. When the metro economy is expanding, we gain people moving here for the opportunities. And the decade ending 2020, counted in the 2020 census, was very much on par with what we saw in the 1980s and 90s. Next slide, please. Yep, here we go. So here's the growth viewed through a different lens, local geography. Here's a map of the region from 10 miles above. We gained people in all of these communities that you see colored various shades of green. The greatest amount of growth on this slide is maybe the developing edge suburbs, but also, there was growth in the center of the region. There was growth in the north, the west, the south, the east. Every quadrant of the metro gained population. Next slide, please. So here's a different way of looking at the 50-year time series. This chart parses the data by county. I know many people on the tab are affiliated with county governments. Growth rates for each of the counties were in a remarkably tight range. At one extreme, call it extreme, Scott and Carver County gained 16, 17%. But keep in mind, those are the two least populated counties. All the remaining counties gained in the range of 9 to 12%. Again, a remarkably tight cluster of growth rates. The takeaway is all the counties are really sharing in the same regional success. To make this clearer, I want to reorganize this chart. You can go to the next slide. Here we go. And this is the same data, but now I'm just showing the difference between the time points, just showing the change incrementally, how much of the growth in each decade and by each county. And yes, Carver and Scott had the highest growth rates, but they also are only a fraction of the size of Hennepin or Ramsey. And speaking of Hennepin and Ramsey, those two counties, purple and red on this slide, enjoyed the largest amount of growth that they each had seen since the 1950s. So it was a very good decade for really all the counties sharing the same regional success. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into the last 1/4 of this presentation. I'm going to briefly dig into one of the demographic trends, the growing diversity of races and origins. I think all of us on this call know that historically, from 1850 to 1990, the Twin Cities was a very white region. This slide shows how that's changing. In the 1990s, the metro's growth was just, in 1990, the metro's population was just 9% Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That's that first bar you see on the graph. And now in 2020, 2021, we're now over 30% Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So I alluded earlier to the main reason for this: migration into the region. People moving here look like the rest of the nation and sometimes the rest of the world. Next slide, please. Here's the geographic look at where the Black, Indigenous, and people of color share of the population is growing. The green areas on this map, and almost all of the map is green. Most, keep in mind, our BIPOC population is young or often otherwise new to the region. Most have not been living here for generations, multiple generations. So when newcomers arrive, they often move in first in Minneapolis or St. Paul or other urban center communities. That was the historical pattern. And these are the gateways to the region. But after some time, people find their way, they become familiar with the larger region. There are great communities to live in, neighborhoods to live in, and housing opportunities all over the region. People do move outward. And so in this most recent decade, these dark green areas on this map saw point shifts in the range of 10 to 20 points shifted toward BIPOC population. You can see this throughout the suburbs. I expect all of you on this call have seen demographic diversification in your own cities. Next slide, please. Just keeping it real, though, keeping it in perspective, the metro region is still overwhelmingly white. Many neighborhoods that were formerly 95% white, maybe now they're 80 or 85% white. Still a largely white region. Okay. Next slide, please. Wrapping up, because I do want to leave the committee time to ask whatever it is you want to ask. All this data is now public and published, available to you, the governments you work with. At Met Council, we have loaded the August data file into our online database and website. The data is available through our community profiles portal. We have also prepared 2 interactive web maps or story maps that you can visit to explore neighborhood level results. These web maps emphasize the changes over the past 4 decades, the past 4 decennial censuses, excuse me. And finally, we've excerpted all the Minnesota data that we got from 2020 census, packaged it for GIS mapping use, and have republished it on the state's MenGeo clearinghouse. Everything that I just mentioned is can be accessed through this web address, metrocouncil.org/2020 census. Stay on this slide for just one second. A final thing that I wanted to mention to TAB members and local governments is we know the census counts are not perfect. There can be issues with miscounts. The Census Bureau does have a process, the very last operation of 2020 census, to consider and receive from local governments errata corrections and errata requests where there is evidence of processing errors that maybe led to miscounts. Now, the Census Bureau, I'll be very candid about it, is stingy about changing numbers, but they do have this count question resolution process. If there are local or tribal governments that can identify and substantiate problems, Census Bureau is willing to listen to that. And Met Council's research office, where I work, we are working to help local governments prepare for that exercise of doing some due diligence on the counts that came out. We're encouraging our colleagues in county GIS offices and city planning offices to at least wade in, evaluate the housing counts and group quarters counts, see if you spot any problems. If you do, give us a call. So that outreach to local governments will be happening this coming winter. Next slide, please. And I think that'll get us to the end. Yes. So thank you, board members and Chair Hovland. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Excellent presentation. Questions for Mr. Graham? Member Narayanan?
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Really excellent presentation and great data. I was wondering if you had just absolute numbers of growth by county in our region.
Yes, and that is available and downloadable at metrocouncil.org/census 2020. I will put that in the chat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Graham? All right. Thank you, Mr. Graham. That was excellent information. If you can provide that to Elaine as well, and Elaine can send that out, I think a lot of folks would love to share that with their colleagues.
Yes.
And so thank you for being here today, and wish you the best for the holidays as well. All right, tab members, we just have a couple of minutes here. Is there anything that any of the tab members wanted to bring up as an item of concern to them? I know I got an email from Dan Keelia. He wasn't with us today, but it caused Elaine and I to have a conversation about the survey and encouraging people to answer the survey and topics of concern to them for 2022. His was about around suburban transit operations throughout the metro and making sure that they were both properly understood and properly in line for sufficient financial resources to sustain and build those operations. So I'm going to visit with him about that a little bit tomorrow. Anything else for the good of the record, Mayor Windschuttle?
Well, I just kind of, that's where I was kind of going. Apparently when I froze up is that we have a bus service available that does have to struggle to get some of the things that they need to operate properly. And that kind of goes with Member Keeley as well. So my overall message is that there is the inner core that has all the transportation around us and has a lot more options, but we can't forget about the surrounding suburbs that we saw from the census that are growing quite fast as well. So that we gotta, when we're looking at this, sometimes I don't think we always look at the whole region as a whole. We look at more of our inner core, and we just need to make sure that we're looking at everything and everywhere, as there's a lot of places expanding and that doesn't have the public transportation. And obviously the EVs are starting to pop up more and more, but as it was stated, that's still quite a distance out as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody else for the good of the order? Otherwise, I think we all wish each other the best of holidays. It's going to be a nice time for everybody, I think, with family and friends. So enjoy yourselves. Thanks for all the great work you did this year. It was really, really well done on all of your parts, and it's certainly one of the best tabs I've ever served on, if not the best. So thanks, everybody, for a great year, 2021, and we'll see you in January.
Thank you, Jim, for your great
Thank
support.
you.
Thank you for your leadership.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everyone.
All the great leadership.